Hello, everyone. Welcome to Diplomatic Brief. Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Trump met in Busan, South Korea for an hour and 40 minutes. After the meeting, China agreed to start purchasing American soybeans. As for the US, it will reduce the related tariffs from 20% to 10%. Simply put, the US tariffs on China will be reduced to 20%, while China's tariffs on the US, except for energy, will be reduced to 10%. This China-US trade dispute, which has dragged on for more than half a year since April this year, seems to have been resolved after the meeting between the two heads of state. During this dispute, scholars generally believe that the US was at a loss, while China advanced steadily with every step. Some scholars even describe China's actions this time as a graceful turnaround. According to Xinhua news agency, President Xi mentioned during the meeting that the two countries should be partners and friends. This is a lesson from history and also a practical necessity. Given the differences in national conditions, it is inevitable that there will be some disagreements. As the world's two largest economies, it's only natural that there will sometimes be some friction. That's perfectly normal. In the face of storms and challenges, the two heads of state, as the helmsmen, should steer the right course and keep the overall situation under control so that the China-US relationship, like a big ship, can move forward steadily. President Xi emphasized that China's economic development momentum is strong. In the first 3 quarters of this year, economic growth reached 5.2%, and imports and exports in global goods trade grew by 4%. These achievements were made despite overcoming both internal and external difficulties. This is no easy feat. He pointed out that China's economy is like a vast ocean. Its scale, resilience, and potential are all considerable. He is confident and capable of handling all kinds of risks and challenges. President Xi emphasized that for over 70 years, China has stuck to a single blueprint from start to finish, never intending to challenge or replace anyone, but rather focusing on doing its own work well and becoming a better version of itself. Economic and trade relations should continue to serve as the ballast and propeller for China-US relations, not as stumbling blocks or obstacles. As for points of conflict, both sides should look at the bigger picture and focus more on the long-term benefits that cooperation brings, rather than falling into a vicious cycle of mutual retaliation. The teams from both sides can continue to negotiate based on the principles of equality, respect, and safeguarding each other's interests, constantly narrowing down the list of issues and expanding the list of areas for cooperation. According to Xinhua news agency, the two heads of state agreed to strengthen cooperation in areas such as economy, trade, and energy, promote people-to-people exchanges, and also agreed to maintain regular communication. Trump is looking forward to visiting China next year and has also invited President Xi to visit the United States. To briefly summarize, the meeting between the two heads of state lasted for an hour and 40 minutes, which is actually quite substantial. This time, the talks used simultaneous interpretation, unlike the previous consecutive interpretation. That means while one side is speaking, the other can listen to the translation through headphones in real time, without having to wait for the speaker to finish before someone translates. So, the entire duration was direct dialogue between the two heads of state for over an hour, compared to previous consecutive interpretation. Under the diplomatic convention of consecutive interpretation, such meetings would have lasted over 3 hours. Professor Wang Yiyi from the School of International Relations at Renmin University of China, in an interview with the Mainland Observer Network, pointed out that the changes in China's countermeasures reflect the country's growing strength. This strength has evolved from purchasing power and market influence to today's technological capabilities, a complete industrial chain, and China's position in the global industrial division of labor, demonstrating China's remarkable transformation. Trump, however, has not realized this, and this contest has tested the true extent of China's capabilities and has also forced the United States to reassess China's strength. Wang Yue described it as follows: China's machine is now running at full capacity, no longer relying on a single lever of power, but rather a series of combined levers. This is why China's countermeasures have become increasingly steady, precise, and forceful. Since 2018, when the Trump administration unilaterally initiated the trade dispute, this China-US trade contest has already lasted for 7 years, and the economic and trade relationship between China and the US has undergone several changes. Wang Yiwei emphasizes that the so-called China-US trade war is actually an inaccurate term. In reality, it is the US suppressing trade with China, and even with the entire world, which has led to the current disruption of free trade rules and the process of globalization. Over the past 7 years, the changes in China's countermeasures have been obvious. From initially only responding at the tariff level, China has gradually developed a diversified set of policy tools, such as entity list controls and anti-monopoly investigations. Now, the rare earth export controls directly strike at the opponent's vital interests. Wang Yiyi points out that during Trump's first term in office, China's countermeasures mainly targeted agricultural interest groups related to his election campaign, including measures like stopping soybean imports. However, in the Trump 2.0 era, China's countermeasures have shifted in a targeted manner to the high-tech sector, including rare earths. He believes that after 7 years, China has made a remarkable transformation, especially in its digitalization and intelligentization, which Trump did not anticipate. Among all of China's countermeasures, the series of new rare earth regulations announced on October 9th has attracted the most attention. The New York Times believes that these policies show that export control measures are not exclusive to the U.S. side. And by controlling the circulation of key minerals, China has demonstrated its influence in the global supply chain. These critical minerals are widely used in products such as chips, automobiles, and missiles. Yang Jiwen, a rare earth analyst at Shanghai Metals Market, pointed out that China holds more than 90% of the world's rare earth refining and separation capacity, and nearly 50% of the world's rare earth reserves, firmly ranking first. China occupies an absolutely dominant position in the global supply chain, and currently, China owns and controls these resources. From raw ore to the entire industrial chain of rare earth processing, China does not rely on any other country at any stage. Even if the United States and other countries mine rare earths, most of them still have to be shipped to China for processing before they can be converted into the high-purity rare earth materials needed to manufacture high-tech products. The New York Times pointed out that the supply chain restriction model adopted by China this time was actually first used by the United States in 2020 against Chinese companies. However, due to its dominant position in rare earth mineral production and its control over other strategic industries, China's ability to use the supply chain as leverage may be even stronger than that of the United States. Farrell, a political scientist at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, said that China has already begun to learn from the strategies used by the United States. It may even surpass the way the United States is currently using it. Huang Erwei pointed out that the strength China demonstrates is not just a matter of simple GDP, but rather China's position in many aspects of the global division of labor. China possesses a complete industrial chain and is truly independent from the United States. This is irreplaceable. At the same time, when facing trade shocks from the United States, China began to strategically plan and accelerate the development of trade relations with other markets such as ASEAN, the EU, and the Global South, building a diversified trade system that is de-Americanized. Previously, nearly a quarter of China's trade was with the United States, so China started to reduce its dependence on trade with the US, promoting the Belt and Road Initiative and making large-scale foreign investments. While diversifying its trade structure, China has also diversified its supply chains and further advanced its trade structure. China is pursuing both autonomous and unilateral opening up, including the construction of domestic free trade zones and alignment with high-standard international agreements. Especially since the US is constrained by its own domestic system and unable to participate in high-quality, high-level trade rules, these negotiations have, in turn, objectively pushed China to participate in the global division of labor at a higher quality and higher level. Proactively pursuing unilateral opening up is an important measure for China to manage risks with the US. The dual circulation strategy, both domestic and international, helps avoid over-reliance on trade with the US or the West, making China safer, stronger, and more independent in its trade. It has also tapped into the potential of service trade, including cross-border e-commerce and digitalization, further enhancing China's position and influence in the global trade structure. The Financial Times believes that, just as the US continues to blockade and suppress China in the technology sector, China has vowed to accelerate independent innovation in cutting-edge national technologies. Dr. Peng from the US also pointed out that China's intensified focus on the technology sector comes as Trump's first term is about to end, and as the US continues to push for so-called strategic decoupling from China. The sanctions have extended from semiconductors to more areas such as biomedicine, and more Chinese companies are being added to the sanctions list. This makes the need for a technological development strategy increasingly urgent. Therefore, Huang Yi believes that China's technological self-reliance and strength are to a large extent thanks to the US. Without the suppression of Chinese technology by Trump and later Biden, China would not have invested so much capital in industries like chips and semiconductors. Not only should the US reassess China, but should also reassess the United States. In preparing for a post-America era, the world now has even higher expectations for China. According to analyses by Chinese scholars and foreign media, when the US wields the tariff baton, China is no longer just issuing delayed warnings. From rare earth controls to reciprocal tariffs, China is now relying on its hard power to declare to the US that it is ready to go head-to-head to the very end. Negotiations are open, so some experts believe that 2025 will be a crucial year, a year when there will be a major turning point in the balance of power between China and the US. In addition, there are two groups who might feel disappointed by the China-US leaders meeting. One is the Taiwan independence supporters, and the other is the anti-China, anti-Hong Kong elements. During the meeting, Trump spoke as positively as possible, praising President Xi as an outstanding and highly respected leader, calling him a great leader of a great nation. When shaking hands with President Xi, Trump even said that this meeting would definitely be very significant. After the meeting ended, Trump personally escorted President Xi to his car as a gesture of their friendly relationship. Trump then boarded Air Force One to return to Washington. During the flight, he told reporters that his meeting with President Xi was wonderful, and he described Xi as a good leader. If 10 points is a perfect score, Trump rated this meeting a 12. He also believed that the two sides had reached consensus on almost all issues. He believes that China and the US can establish a long-term positive relationship. In short, Trump went on at length listing all the consensus achievements reached with the Chinese side, such as agreements on chips, TikTok, suspending ship fees, and so on. However, he did not mention any of the politically sensitive issues that had been hyped up before the meeting, such as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Taiwan issue, or even the Jimmy Lai case. Previously, more than 30 bipartisan U.S. senators jointly signed a letter urging Trump to raise the issue of the release of media founder Jimmy Lai with President Xi. On October 24th, when Trump was interviewed before boarding Air Force One, he declared that this issue was on his list and would be brought up at the appropriate time, leading the public to expect that the Jimmy Lai case would also be mentioned during the leaders' meeting. However, once Trump arrived at the venue, he responded to Xi Jinping's call, saying that both sides should focus on the bigger picture and look more towards cooperation. Long-term interests shouldn't fall into a vicious cycle of mutual retaliation, so Trump didn't mention any issues that might upset the Chinese side at all. In conclusion, Trump only cares about major economic and trade deals with China. Although he occasionally brought up Jimmy Lai before, it seemed more like he was using the opportunity to put pressure on China without any real intention to fight for anything. This makes people feel that, just as some so-called comrades have said, Jimmy Lai was used like a condom, used and then discarded. Saying one thing and doing another is typical behavior for Trump. Since he started running for a second term again, he has repeatedly made offhand remarks about wanting to save Jimmy Lai, but of course nothing ever came of it. Nothing is more important than America's own interests. Just like with the Taiwan issue, when Trump was recently asked whether he would discuss Taiwan with President Xi, he said there wouldn't be much to talk about. Taiwan is just Taiwan. At first, Taiwan still had quite a bit of hope, but as for the outcome, well, that's self-explanatory.